Let me give you one piece of advice. Never grab a human by the collar. Grath did, and we're still cleaning his teeth off the floor. Look, I have been working station security for nearly 12 cycles now, and let me tell you something. I have seen every type of idiot the galaxy has to offer. My name is Vex, and I am what you would call a professional problem solver. Well, that is the polite way to say it. The honest way, I am the guy who throws drunk cargo haulers out of bars and makes sure nobody starts a plasma fire in the docking bays. I am Kragath. 7 feet 2 inches of muscle, bone plating, and what my supervisor calls a naturally assertive personality. What she actually means is that my species evolved on a high-gravity world where everything wanted to eat us. So we got really good at hitting things first. Hard. Our bone structure is dense enough to stop most small-caliber projectiles, and our muscle fibers are about 3 times as efficient as the galactic average. We are built for violence, basically, which makes us perfect for station security. Trading Station Kelthara 9 is not exactly the center of civilized space. It is more like the armpit of civilized space. If we are being honest here, we get about 40,000 transient visitors per rotation, most of them haulers, traders, smugglers, who are not quite good enough at smuggling, and tourists, who made some really questionable life choices. My job is to keep them from killing each other, or at least, to make sure they do it in ways that do not damage station infrastructure. You would be surprised how expensive hull repairs are. The station itself is a rotating wheel. Standard design. Nothing fancy. Docking spokes radiate out from the central hub like the legs of some mechanical spider. The outer ring holds all the fun stuff. Markets, cantinas, pleasure halls, fighting pits, and about 6,000 different places where people can make terrible decisions. Gravity at the outer ring is 0.9 standard, which is comfortable for most species. Not quite heavy enough for me to feel at home, but I manage. Security headquarters sits in Spoke 7, which gives us quick access to pretty much everywhere that matters. My shift starts at 2200 station time, which is when things typically start getting interesting. That is when the cargo haulers finish their loading shifts and head to the cantinas with their pay credits burning holes in their pockets. That is when the gamblers get desperate. That is when people start thinking that violence might solve their problems. Spoiler alert, it usually does not. But that does not stop them from trying. Now I have worked with a lot of different species over the cycles. Dranaki with their 4 arms and superiority complexes. Molkor, who can breathe methane and think that makes them special. Vilnari traders with their compound eyes and chittering language that sounds like someone stepping on bubble wrap. The point is, you learn pretty quick which species you need to watch, which ones are all bluster, and which ones will actually throw down when pushed. And then about 2 standard months ago the humans showed up. Oh man, the humans. First time I saw the bulletin about Earth being added to the registered trade worlds list, I barely paid attention. Another backwater planet full of primitives who just figured out faster than light travel. Happens every few cycles. They show up, they are all excited about joining the galactic community. They realize that nobody really cares about their little world, and then they settle into the boring routine of interstellar commerce. Standard stuff. What made the humans interesting, at least to my colleagues in security, was how pathetically fragile they looked. I mean seriously, when the first human trade delegation arrived at Kelthara 9, half the security team could not stop laughing. They are tiny. Average height maybe 5.5 feet, thin bone structure. No natural armor plating. No claws. No venom sacs. No bioelectric organs. Nothing. Just soft, squishy, pink or brown skin stretched over what looked like the galaxy's least impressive skeletal system. They are from a garden world, my partner Ralph kept saying, wheezing with laughter. Ralph is Molkor, built like a boulder with legs, and he found the whole thing hilarious. Look at them, Vex. Look. They probably evolved eating fruit and running away from actual predators. I had to admit, he had a point. According to the registration data, Earth was classified as a Class 7 world. Nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere. Single large moon. Liquid water oceans. Average surface temperature in the comfortable range. 1.0 standard gravity. Everything about it screamed easy living. No wonder the humans looked so soft. Within a week of their arrival, there was a betting pool going around the security department. The question was not if a human would get seriously hurt in a station altercation, It was when Ralph put his money on less than 10 rotations. I gave them maybe 20, because I am an optimist. Our supervisor Kelna refused to participate on ethical grounds, but I saw her slip Ralph 20 credits and whisper 8 rotations when she thought nobody was watching. The humans, bless their naive little hearts, seemed completely oblivious to the fact that pretty much every other species on the station viewed them as walking target practice. They set up their little trade office in the commercial district. They smiled at everyone with those weird flat teeth. They were polite. They said please and thank you. They followed every single station regulation like they were afraid of getting detention. It was almost cute, like watching baby Kelrath trying to hunt before they figured out which end of their prey bites. Most of the action on Kelthara 9 happens in the cantinas, and there are about 24 of them scattered around the outer ring. But the one that matters, the one where reputations are made and broken, is a place called the Gravity Well. Terrible name, decent drinks, and absolutely zero tolerance for boring behavior. The owner, a Thranaki named Court, encourages what he calls spirited disagreements, because violence is good for business. As long as you do not damage the furniture, he does not care if you rearrange someone's face. The Gravity Well is where I spend most of my shift. Not inside, usually, but close enough to respond when things get out of hand, which they do, frequently. I have lost count of how many times I have had to drag someone out of there in restraints. It is part of the job. And here is the thing about the Gravity Well. It is also where you go if you want to establish dominance. If you are new to the station and you want people to know you are not someone to mess with, you make your presence known there. You take up space. You make noise. Maybe you pick a fight with someone smaller than you and make sure everyone sees you win. So naturally, when the humans started showing up at the Gravity Well during off-duty hours, everyone paid attention. Not because they were impressive, because they were prey. I remember the first time I saw one of them walk in there. Human male, maybe 30 standard years old, wearing a plain gray jumpsuit with an Earth flag patch on the shoulder. He walked up to the bar, ordered something called whiskey, which apparently is a human intoxicant, and just sat there, drinking, alone, not bothering anyone. Ralph elbowed me in the ribs. How long you think before someone messes with him? Maybe they will leave him alone, I said without much conviction. You do not actually believe that? No, I do not. But surprisingly, that first night, nothing happened. The human finished his drink, paid his tab, and left. No incidents, no problems. Ralph complained that his entertainment had been ruined. It was only later, after everything went sideways, that I realized what we were actually seeing that night. It was not that people were leaving the human alone out of respect or kindness. It was that they were watching, waiting, figuring out the angles. Predators do not rush in blind. They observe their prey first. They look for weakness. And everyone was absolutely certain the humans were weak. We were so wrong. The human trade delegation consisted of about 15 individuals, and they rotated through the station in shifts. Most of them were forgettable, polite, quiet, efficiently boring. They negotiated their cargo contracts, they paid their docking fees on time, and they did not cause problems, which, honestly, made them some of the best visitors we had. I almost started to like them, in the way you might like a well-behaved pet. But then there was Victoria Reeves. First time I saw her, she was walking through the main concourse with a datapad in one hand and a thermal container of something in the other. Coffee, I learned later. Humans are obsessed with it. She was tiny, even by human standards. Maybe 5 feet, 4 inches tall, slim build. Dark hair pulled back in what they call a ponytail. She wore the same gray jumpsuit as the rest of her delegation, and she had this expression on her face like she was trying very hard not to laugh at a private joke. By station standards, she was completely unimpressive. I have seen cargo containers that looked more intimidating. Her arms were thin, no visible muscle definition. Her hands were small and delicate-looking. Everything about her physical presence screamed fragile, breakable, weak. If you put her next to pretty much any other species on Kelthara 9, she looked like something that belonged in a habitat enclosure, not walking around unsupervised. Rolf saw her before I did. He actually stopped mid-sentence, stared, and started laughing so hard he had to lean against a wall. That is a human. Vex, are you seeing this? I have sneezed things that look more dangerous. Even Kelna, who usually maintains professional decorum, raised one of her facial ridges in what I can only describe as concerned pity. How did they survive long enough to develop space travel? She muttered. Natural selection should have eliminated them in the first generation. I watched Victoria walk past a group of Velnari traders who barely glanced at her, dismissing her as irrelevant. She did not seem to notice or care. She just kept walking with that almost smile on her face, sipping her coffee, completely at ease. And here is what I thought, watching her. This is what happens when evolution takes it easy on you. Earth is clearly a paradise world where nothing ever goes wrong. Comfortable temperature, plenty of food, no real predators. So humans never had to develop any actual survival traits. They are what you get when a species has no environmental pressure to be strong, fast, or dangerous. Garden world babies. I actually felt a little sorry for them. Over the next few weeks I noticed Victoria more often. She seemed to be the delegation's primary negotiator, which meant she spent a lot of time in the commercial district. I saw her haggle with a Thranaki spice merchant, who tried to overcharge her by 400%. She negotiated him down to reasonable rates within 5 minutes, smiling the entire time. The Thranaki looked confused afterwards, like he was not quite sure what had happened. I saw her help a Kelrath engineer who dropped a container of microcomponents all over the deck, plating. She got down on her hands and knees and spent 20 minutes helping him collect the tiny pieces, even though it was not her mess and not her problem. I saw her break up an argument between two drunk Mulcor cargo haulers by simply standing between them and talking in this calm, reasonable voice until they both got embarrassed and walked away. She was, from what I could tell, aggressively nice, which made what eventually happened even more shocking. But I am getting ahead of myself. There are certain individuals on Kelfara 9 that everyone knows about, not because they are important or respected, but because they are problems. The kind of problems that security has to deal with on a regular basis, bullies, basically, who use their size and strength to intimidate smaller species and get away with it just enough that we cannot permanently ban them from the station. Grath was one of those problems. Grath is Kragoth, like me, but that is where the similarities end, where I at least try to maintain some professional standards. Grath is just mean. 7 feet, 4 inches of bad attitude and worse hygiene. He works as a freelance cargo hauler, which means he loads and unloads shipments for whoever pays him. It is hard physical labor, and Grath is very good at it. It is also completely beneath his own estimation of his importance in the universe. He has been thrown out of the gravity well 11 times in the past cycle alone, usually for starting fights, never for finishing them because Grath is smart enough to pick on people smaller than him. Vilnari traders, Kelrath engineers, anyone who will not or cannot fight back effectively. He gets his thrills from watching people flinch when he moves toward them. Security has filed reports, station management has issued warnings, but Grath never quite crosses the line far enough to justify permanent removal. He is always just barely inside the rules, and he knows it. I have personally pulled him off 3 different people and given him the speech about acceptable behavior. He always apologizes, pays whatever minor fine is levied, and then does it again 2 weeks later. Everyone hates Grath, but everyone is also just slightly afraid of him, which is exactly how he likes it. The first time I saw Grath notice the humans, something cold settled in my stomach. I knew that look. It was the look of a predator spotting wounded prey. He was sitting in the gravity well, 3 drinks deep into what was clearly going to be a bad night, and Victoria walked past the entrance with 2 other humans. They were laughing about something, completely oblivious to the danger. Grath watched them go by. Then he smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Hey, Vex," Ralph said quietly. He had seen it too. "Should we, warn them?" I thought about it. Technically, nothing had happened yet. We could not arrest someone for looking at someone else, and maybe Grath would have enough sense to leave them alone. But I knew better. I have worked station security long enough to recognize the pattern. Grath had picked his next target. The only question was when, not if. I should have done something right then. Filed a preemptive report. Assigned extra patrols. Something. But I did not, because honestly I figured the worst that would happen is a human would get scared, file a complaint, and then station management would finally have enough justification to ban Grath permanently. Problem solved. What I did not consider, not even for a second, was the possibility that I had the whole situation completely backwards. It happened on a night cycle about 3 weeks after the humans first arrived. The gravity well was packed, which is never a good sign. When you cram 200 beings from 40 different species into a space designed for maybe half that number, and then add alcohol, gambling, and the kind of music that is less about melody and more about volume, you are basically creating a pressure cooker of bad decisions. I was standing near the entrance, doing my usual scan of the room. Court, the Thranaki owner, gave me a nod from behind the bar. He knows the routine. I stay visible, he keeps serving drinks, and we both pretend that this is a respectable establishment. The air smelled like a chemical plant explosion, which is what happens when you mix the intoxicants and pheromones of 4 dozen species in a poorly ventilated room. Grath was at his usual table in the back corner, already drunk. I could tell by the way he was leaning too far forward and speaking too loudly at the 3 other cargo haulers sitting with him. They were laughing at something, that particular kind of mean laughter that usually precedes someone getting hurt. I made a mental note to keep an eye on them. That is when Victoria walked in. She was not alone. 2 other humans were with her, both male, both slightly taller than her but still small by station standards. One was named Marcus. I had checked his registration earlier. The other I did not recognize. They made their way to the bar, weaving through the crowd with the kind of careful politeness that screamed newcomer. Victoria was still carrying that thermal container. More coffee. Did this woman ever stop drinking coffee? They found space at the bar and ordered drinks. Human alcohol, I assumed, since they had started importing their own beverages after discovering that most station intoxicants either did nothing to their biology or made them violently ill. They were talking among themselves, not bothering anyone, just 3 colleagues unwinding after a shift. Grath noticed them immediately. I saw him sit up straighter, that predatory focus sharpening through the drunken haze. He said something to his companions that made them all turn to look at the humans. More laughter, louder this time. One of them, a Kragath named Drell, shook his head like he was warning Grath off. Smart guy, Drell. Unfortunately, Grath is not smart when he is sober, and he is definitely not smart when he is drunk. Grath stood up. All 7 feet, 4 inches of him. He was swaying slightly, but that almost made him more dangerous, not less. Drunk people are unpredictable. Drunk bullies are worse. I started moving toward him, but the crowd was thick and I was still a good 30 feet away when Grath reached the bar. He planted himself directly behind Victoria, close enough that she had to notice. She did. She turned around, looked up at him, and I saw her expression shift from relaxed to alert in about half a second. Well, 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 Grath said, his voice carrying over the noise of the cantina. Several nearby conversations stopped. People turned to watch. Everyone loves a show. Look what we have here. Humans. The famous garden world weaklings. Victoria looked at her companions, then back at Grath. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost friendly. Hi there. We are just having a drink, not looking for trouble. Grath laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Trouble? You think you would know trouble if it bit you? Look at you. You are tiny. What are you? Somebody's pet. The 2 human males tensed. Marcus put a hand on Victoria's shoulder like he was about to step in front of her. She shook her head slightly, some kind of signal between them. Marcus backed off, but he did not look happy about it. Listen, Victoria said, still using that calm tone, I understand you have probably had a bit to drink. Why do not we let us just go our separate ways? No harm done. We can all go back to having a nice evening. Wrong move. Grath interpreted her reasonableness as fear, her diplomacy as weakness. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. Oh, you understand. How generous. How weak. You know what your problem is, human. You are soft. Your whole species is soft. You come to our station, you walk around like you belong here, but you are nothing, nothing. I was close now, pushing through the crowd. I could see where this was going, and I needed to intervene before Grath actually made contact. Station regulations are very clear. Security can detain individuals for threatening behavior, but we have more latitude if physical contact occurs. I was hoping to stop this at the threatening stage. Victoria took a step back, hands up in a placating gesture. Okay, you have made your point. We are leaving. She turned to go. That is when Grath made his mistake. He reached out, fast for someone his size, and grabbed for the collar of her jumpsuit. The clear intention was to lift her off her feet, to humiliate her in front of the entire cantina, to establish dominance in the most physical way possible. I had seen him do it before to Vilnari traders, grab them by their clothing, lift them up, shake them a little, then drop them. Terrifying for the victim, entertaining for the crowd, and just barely not enough violence to warrant serious charges. His hand closed on the fabric of her collar, and then everything went sideways. I mean that literally. 1 second Grath was reaching for Victoria, the next second he was rotating sideways through the air. It happened so fast that my brain could not process the individual movements. All I saw was Victoria moving, her body dropping and twisting, her hands coming up in a motion that was way too precise to be accidental, and then Grath was airborne. 7 feet, 4 inches, probably close to 400 pounds. Airborne. He hit a table occupied by 3 Mulkor traders. The table exploded into fragments. Drinks went flying. The Mulkors scrambled away, screaming in their high-pitched language. Grath crashed to the deck plating with a sound like a cargo container being dropped from a loading crane. The entire cantina went silent. I mean, dead silent. Even the music seemed to stop, though that might have just been my perception. 200 beings from 40 different species, all frozen, all staring at the small human woman who was now standing in a very specific stance, weight balanced, hands up, looking down at Grath with an expression that I can only describe as mildly annoyed. Grath groaned. He tried to push himself up. His right arm, the one he had used to grab Victoria, was bending at an angle that arms should not bend. Even from where I was standing, I could see the bone pressing against the skin, compound fracture. Bad one. He looked up at Victoria, and for the first time in all the cycles I have known him, I saw actual fear in Grath's eyes. Victoria tilted her head slightly, like she was considering something. When she spoke, her voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something cold. I tried to warn you. I really did. But you just had to grab me, did you not? Grath opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to threaten. I will never know, because Victoria moved again, and this time I saw it clearly. She stepped forward, her foot coming up in a motion that was absolutely beautiful in its efficiency, and kicked him directly in the jaw. The sound was like a gunshot. Grath's head snapped back. Several teeth flew out of his mouth, glittering in the cantina lighting before clattering to the floor. His jaw made a crunching sound that I felt in my own bones. He collapsed, unconscious before he hit the ground. Victoria lowered her foot, brushed off her jumpsuit, and picked up her thermal container from where she had set it on the bar. She took a sip of her coffee. Then she looked directly at me. "Sorry about the mess," she said. "I will pay for the table. I need to back up for a second because what I just described does not actually capture what happened. My brain was trying to process events in real time and frankly my brain was failing. So let me break down what Victoria actually did, as best as I can understand it because I have spent the last several weeks reviewing security footage and consulting with medical staff, and I still barely believe it. When Grath grabbed her collar, Victoria did not pull away. That is the first thing that makes no sense. Every instinct, every survival response should have told her to retreat. But she did not. Instead, she moved toward him, dropping her center of gravity and rotating her entire body in one smooth motion. Her hands came up, one grabbing his wrist, the other his elbow, and she used his own momentum against him. Now, here is where the physics gets interesting. Grath outweighed Victoria by probably 250 pounds. He is significantly taller, stronger, and has bone density that can stop most blunt force trauma. By every logical calculation, he should have been able to do whatever he wanted with her. Lift her, throw her, whatever. But Victoria did not try to match his strength. She redirected it. She turned his grab into a lever, his arm into a fulcrum, and his own body weight into the force that threw him. It was not her strength that sent him flying. It was his. The technique was called a hip throw. I learned later. Humans have dozens of martial arts disciplines, combat systems developed over thousands of years specifically designed to let smaller individuals defeat larger opponents. Victoria had apparently trained in something called judo since she was 6 years old, 20+ years of practice, muscle memory so deep it was practically instinct. When Grath hit the table, his arm was already compromised. The throw had hyperextended his elbow, and the impact finished the job. The radius, that is the bone in the forearm, snapped cleanly, but the ulna, the other forearm bone, did not break cleanly. It fractured lengthwise and the jagged end punched through the muscle tissue and skin, creating what medical personnel call a compound fracture. It looked absolutely horrible. There was blood, quite a lot of it, and the bone was visible, which is never a good sign in any species. Grath was conscious enough to scream, this high-pitched sound that did not seem like it could come from something his size. And Victoria just stood there watching him try to get up, her expression completely neutral. That is when I should have intervened. That is when I should have called for medical and gotten between them. But I could not move. I was rooted to the spot, my brain trying desperately to reconcile what I had just witnessed with everything I thought I knew about humans. Grath managed to get to his knees, cradling his ruined arm. He looked up at Victoria with that fear in his eyes, but also anger, humiliation. He was about to say something, probably another threat, because Grath has never been smart enough to know when to quit. Victoria did not give him the chance. She stepped forward, and her movement was so casual it almost looked lazy. Her right foot came off the ground in a circular motion, building momentum, and then snapped forward with her entire body weight behind it. Her boot, standard station issue, size probably 6.5, connected with Grath's jaw at what the medical report later estimated was somewhere around 40 miles per hour. The human body, I have since learned, is capable of generating incredible striking force when properly trained. The leg muscles are the strongest in the body. The hips can rotate to add torque. The entire kinetic chain, from the ground through the foot to the point of impact, can deliver energy that far exceeds what you would expect from something that looks so small and fragile. Victoria's kick carried approximately 800 pounds of force. I know this because the medical team measured the damage and worked backwards. Grath's jaw shattered. Not broke. Shattered. 3 teeth came out immediately, flying across the cantina like little calcium projectiles. 2 more cracked at the root and would need to be extracted later. His jawbone fractured in 4 places. The mandibular condyle, that is the part that connects the jaw to the skull, dislocated completely on the left side. The sound was similar to dropping a crate of glass containers onto a hard surface. Crunchy. Wet. Final. Grath went down like someone had cut his power supply. His eyes rolled back, his body went limp, and he collapsed face first onto the deck plating. More blood pooled under his head, mixing with the spilled drinks and broken glass from the destroyed table. Victoria stood over him for maybe 3 seconds, just watching, making sure he was not getting back up, I think. Then she turned, walked back to the bar, and picked up her coffee. She took a sip, made a slight face like it had gotten cold, and set it down again. The silence in the gravity well was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard someone thinking about dropping a pin. 200 beings, not one of them making a sound, all staring at this tiny human woman who had just dismantled a Kragath enforcer like he was made of cheap packing materials. Then someone, I think it was one of the Mulkor, whose table got destroyed, started laughing. Nervous, high-pitched laughter that broke the spell. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, the noise level rising from 0 to deafening in about 2 seconds. I finally got my body to respond to my brain's commands and pushed through the crowd to Grath. He was still breathing, which was good. His pulse was strong, also good. But he was definitely unconscious, and the amount of blood was concerning. I triggered my comm unit. Security to medical, gravity well cantina, priority response. 1 Kragath male, unconscious, significant facial and arm trauma, possible concussion. The response came back in maybe 5 seconds. Medical team en route. What happened? I looked at Victoria, who was now talking quietly with Marcus and the other human. They did not look surprised. That was the thing that struck me. Marcus looked concerned, sure, but not shocked. The other human was actually smiling a little, like this was a normal Friday night. He picked a fight with the wrong person, I said into the comm. Rolf appeared at my shoulder, staring down at Grath, then at Victoria, then back at Grath. What just happened? Did that human just do that? Yeah, I said. Yeah, she did. But she is tiny. She is maybe 100 pounds. How did she? I mean, he is Kragath, Vex. He is one of us. How did a human do that to one of us? I did not have an answer. Not yet. The medical team arrived within 3 minutes, 2 Kelreth medics and a Thranaki trauma specialist. They took one look at Greth and immediately called for a stretcher. The Thranaki, a female named Silith who I had worked with before, whistled through her mandibles. "Somebody beat him with a cargo loader?" she asked. "No," I said. "Her," I pointed at Victoria. Silith looked at Victoria, looked at me, looked at Victoria again. "You are joking." I really wish I was. They loaded Greth onto the stretcher, stabilized his arm, and fitted a cervical collar around his neck to keep his broken jaw from moving. He started to regain consciousness as they were lifting him, groaning through his shattered mouth. The sound was pitiful. Silith administered a sedative, and he went quiet again. As they were carrying him out, I approached Victoria. My hand was on my stun baton, not because I thought I would need it, but because protocol required it when approaching someone who had just committed an act of violence. Up close, she looked even less impressive, maybe 120 pounds soaking wet, no visible weapons, no armor, just a human in a gray jumpsuit drinking cold coffee. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice professional, "I am going to need you to come with me to security headquarters. We need to take a statement about what happened here." She nodded, completely calm. "Of course. That is completely reasonable. Do I need a lawyer or legal representation?" "That is your right, but this is just a preliminary statement. You are not under arrest." "Yet," she said, with a slight smile. "Yet," I agreed. Marcus stepped forward. "Vex, right? I have seen you around." "Look," Greth grabbed her first. "There are probably 50 witnesses who saw him initiate contact. This was self-defense." "I know what I saw," I said. "But we still have procedures." Victoria put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "It is fine, I will go give my statement. You two head back to the quarters. Let Captain Harrison know what happened. He is going to want to file an official report with station management." "You sure?" Marcus asked. "Completely. I will be fine." As we walked out of the gravity well, I could feel every eye in the place following us. The crowd parted without me having to ask. People actually stepped back when Victoria passed, like she was radioactive or something. Outside, in the corridor, Victoria spoke first. "Is he going to be okay?" "Greth, I mean, probably," I said. "Broken jaw, broken arm, concussion. He will heal. Eventually." "Good, I did not want to kill him, just make a point." "Well, you definitely made a point. What was that? What did you do to him?" Victoria looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something other than calm professionalism in her expression. She looked tired, maybe a little sad. "Judo and Muay Thai," she said. "Been training since I was a kid. My parents thought it would be good for self-confidence. Turns out it is also good for dealing with bullies who do not understand the word no. That was not just training. That was, I have never seen anyone move like that." She shrugged. "Yeah. Well, where I come from you learn to defend yourself. The universe is not always friendly to people who look easy to push around." And that, right there, was when I first started to understand that maybe, just maybe, we had gotten everything about humans completely wrong. After I took Victoria's statement, which was concise, accurate, and delivered with zero emotional embellishment, I did something I should have done 3 weeks earlier. I actually read the full registration file on Earth and its inhabitants. Not just the summary page. The whole thing. All 247 pages of it. Let me tell you, it was educational in the most horrifying way possible. Earth is classified as a Class 7 world. That part I knew. What I did not know, what apparently nobody bothered to read, was the subcategory designation. Right there on page 3, in standard galactic font, was a notation that should have been highlighted, underlined, and possibly set on fire for emphasis. Death World, category 12 out of 12. I actually had to look up what that meant, because in 12 cycles of station security work I had never encountered the term. The Galactic Environmental Database defines a death world as a planet where the environmental conditions, predator saturation, disease load, or evolutionary pressure creates extreme danger for the dominant species. Category 12 is the highest rating. It means that by galactic standards, Earth is actively trying to kill everything that lives on it. Let me give you some highlights from the report, just so you can appreciate how badly we miscalculated. Earth's gravity is 1.0 standard. That sounds normal, right? Comfortable even. What the report notes, in dry academic language, is that 1.0 standard is at the high end of the comfort range. Most garden worlds sit at 0.8 or 0.9. Humans evolved under constant pressure that is 10 to 20% higher than what most species consider normal. Their bone density is correspondingly higher. Their muscle efficiency is optimized for fighting that gravity every single day of their lives. Earth's atmosphere is 21% oxygen. The report flagged this as unusually high. High oxygen content supports larger organisms and more energetic metabolisms. It also makes everything more flammable, which apparently was not a problem for Earth's evolutionary path because everything there evolved to deal with it. Humans can metabolize energy faster than most species. Their endurance is exceptional. They can run for hours if they need to. Earth's predator load. Oh man, the predator load. The planet has thousands of apex predator species, many of which view humans as potential prey. Humans did not evolve in a safe ecological niche. They evolved in direct competition with creatures that had claws, fangs, venom, and millions of years of hunting optimization. Know how humans survived? They got smart, they got cooperative, and they got extremely good at violence. The report included a list of Earth's most dangerous species. I stopped reading after the first page because it was giving me anxiety. Giant reptiles that can run 40 miles per hour. Cats that weigh 600 pounds and can snap a neck with one bite. Bears. The report spent 3 paragraphs on bears. Apparently they are omnivorous mammals that can weigh up to 1,500 pounds, run 30 miles per hour, and have been known to fight humans for fattery. And humans, insane as it sounds, sometimes win those fights. Then there are the environmental hazards. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, temperature variations that swing from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius depending on location and season. Humans built their entire civilization while dealing with a planet that regularly tries to kill them with natural disasters. But here is the thing that really got me. The thing that made me sit back in my chair and stare at the wall for a solid 10 minutes. Humans are not even the apex predator on their own planet. They are somewhere in the middle of the food chain. They survived, and eventually dominated, through intelligence, cooperation, and the kind of brutal pragmatism that comes from 10,000 generations of being both predator and prey. Every single human walking around this station is the descendant of survivors. Not the lucky ones who happen to live on an easy world. The ones who fought for every single day of their existence against a planet that was actively hostile to their survival. And we thought they were weak. We thought they were soft. We thought they were garden world babies who got lucky with technology. I started having flashbacks to every interaction I had witnessed with humans over the past 3 weeks. Victoria helping that Kelrath engineer pick up dropped components. At the time I thought she was being nice. Now I realized she was operating under extraordinary restraint. She could have ignored him. She could have been annoyed. But she chose kindness, even though her instincts, her evolutionary programming, probably told her that showing weakness was dangerous. The human who got laughed at in the gravity well that first night, he did not fight back or even respond to the insults. I thought it was because he was scared. Now I understood it was because he was civilized. He chose not to respond with violence, even though he absolutely could have. Every polite interaction, every diplomatic negotiation, every time a human backed down from a confrontation, that was not weakness. That was control. That was a species that learned to restrain its violent impulses because unrestrained violence on a death world means extinction. The report included physiological data too. Human reaction time averages around 0.25 seconds for trained individuals. Their hand-eye coordination is exceptional, probably evolved for throwing weapons at prey and predators. Their capacity to process multiple threats simultaneously is among the highest recorded in any sapient species. They have binocular vision optimized for tracking fast-moving targets. Their vestibular system, the thing that controls balance, is incredibly sophisticated because they evolved as bipedal hunters on varied terrain. Oh, and here is a fun fact. Humans have a stress response called adrenaline. When threatened, their bodies dump a cocktail of chemicals into their bloodstream that temporarily increases strength, speed, pain tolerance, and reaction time. It is a biological combat drug that they produce naturally. In sufficient quantities, a human experiencing a full adrenaline response can ignore injuries that would incapacitate most species and continue fighting. Victoria probably was not even trying particularly hard when she took down Grath. She was just operating on training and instinct. For her, it was routine. Defend yourself, neutralize the threat, walk away. Another Thursday evening. I filed my report with station management. Captain Harrison from the human delegation filed his report. Security footage was reviewed by 3 separate supervisors. The consensus was unanimous. Grath initiated contact. Victoria responded with appropriate force given the threat. Case closed. No charges filed. Self-defense. Clean and simple. But the story spread. Oh, did the story spread? Within 12 hours, everyone on Kelthara 9 knew that a small human female, had destroyed Grath in a fight that lasted less than 5 seconds. The security footage got leaked somehow. I am not saying it was Ralph, but it was definitely Ralph, and it circulated through every datapad and comm unit on the station. The attitude shift was immediate and dramatic. Humans went from being dismissible jokes to being, well, respected is not quite the right word. Feared is closer. People moved out of their way in corridors. Traders stopped trying to overcharge them. The betting pool in the security department was quietly dissolved, and several people, including me, felt deeply embarrassed about the whole thing. Grath's recovery was long and unpleasant. The medical team had to wire his jaw shut to let the bone fragments heal properly. He could not eat solid food for 3 months. Everything went through a feeding tube. Liquids only. His arm required surgery. 2 different procedures to set the bones and repair the muscle damage. He was on medical leave for 4 months total. When he finally came back to work, he was different. Quieter. More careful. He did not start fights anymore. Did not even raise his voice. Someone asked him what happened. I heard this secondhand, and he just said that he learned a valuable lesson about respect. He also never went to the gravity well again. Could not stand to be in the place where his reputation died. Station management implemented new protocols. Nothing official, nothing written down, but there was a general understanding among security staff. If a human is involved in a confrontation, respond immediately. Do not wait to see how it plays out. Humans have been reclassified from low threat to high threat, and we treat them accordingly. Which mostly means we treat them with the same caution we would show a Kregoth enforcer or a Thranaki combat specialist. Victoria became something of a station legend. People pointed her out in corridors, whispered when she walked by. She handled it with the same calm professionalism she showed in everything else. Still polite, still friendly, still willing to help if someone asked. But now, everyone understood that the politeness was a choice, not a weakness. She actually became an unofficial peacekeeper. I saw it happen multiple times. A confrontation would start brewing in the commercial district or one of the cantinas, voices rising, postures getting aggressive. Then Victoria would walk over, coffee in hand, and just stand there. Not threatening, not even speaking sometimes. Just present. And the confrontation would diffuse immediately, because nobody wanted to be the next cautionary tale. 3 months after the incident, I ran into her in the main concourse. She was carrying a datapad and that eternal thermal container of coffee. I nodded to her. She nodded back. Quiet shift? She asked. Thanks to you, mostly, I said. People have been much better behaved since you educated Grath about personal boundaries. She smiled, that same almost smile I remembered from the first time I saw her. I did not mean to cause such a fuss. I just wanted him to stop grabbing me. You could have filed a complaint, gone through official channels. I could have. But where I come from, sometimes you have to stand up for yourself directly. Words do not always work with bullies. Sometimes they need a more physical education. Your world sounds intense. It is, she said. But it teaches you useful skills, how to assess threats, how to defend yourself, how to know when to fight and when to walk away. Grath did not give me the option to walk away, so. She shrugged. For what it is worth, I said, I am sorry we underestimated your people. I made some stupid assumptions based on appearances. Yeah, you did, she agreed, but her tone was not hostile, just factual. But you learned, that is what matters. Most species eventually figure out that humans are tougher than we look. You just had a more dramatic education than most. She started to walk away, then paused and looked back. Hey Vex, you are good at your job. You keep this station safe. I respect that. If you ever need backup, if things get really bad, you let me know. Okay? I watched her disappear into the crowd, this tiny human who had fundamentally changed how everyone on Kelthara 9 viewed her entire species. I thought about Grath, eating through a tube, his jaw wired shut. I thought about my own arrogance, my assumption that size and strength were the only things that mattered in a fight. I thought about Earth, that death world spinning through space, producing generation after generation of survivors who learned to smile politely while carrying the capacity for extraordinary violence. And I made a mental note, one that I have followed religiously ever since. Never ever assume that something small is weak. Never assume that something polite is harmless. And definitely never grab a human by the collar. They really do not like that.